Hey guys, I'm Valiant. Today we're going to be talking about my Stormclaw Druid build. So I've pretty much tested out everything that I could think of. I'm going to go over the changes that I did make, build variations, and if you want to play the build differently, and how to go about it and what to change. Technically, you don't need any uniques to play this build, but I would suggest to wait until you have the Great Staff of Crone. And for the abilities, I'm not going to go as in-depth as usual, but I will be going over variations and what you can use instead. So for my first ability, I'm using Bloodhell. I do focus a lot on attack speed, and this also heals you as well. You could use this in other variations. If you want to focus more on your Earthen Bulwark, this still works. But if you want to do an injured build, you are going to have to replace this because you don't want any ability to heal you. You want to stay at the 35% for the extra damage reduction. A good candidate for a replacement for this would be Poison Creeper, especially if you're focusing on Bulwark. Our next ability is going to be a Hurricane. This with Earthen Bulwark are pretty consistent across all builds. They are a staple in most Druid builds, Hurricane more specifically. It slows enemies around you, it stacks Disobedience. Enemies affected by it will deal 20% less damage, and it also helps with procs, such as Symbiotic Aspect. And the next ability is going to be Earthen Bulwark. This is our defensive, and it is a big source of damage as well. We are going to be using the Symbiotic Aspect to make this spammable, and I'm going to make another video to explain barrier generation, and more specifically Earthen Bulwark in more detail. For the ultimate, I am using Cataclysm. I prefer this over all the other ultimates, and I'll explain why. For one, we are using the Inexorable Heart, which allows our ultimates to pull enemies towards us. The second reason is it has a duration, unlike Petrify. Petrify will pull enemies towards you, but it will stop shortly after. This will pull enemies towards you until you hit the limit on the heart. It caps out at 50. I'm not using Grisly Rage for a couple of reasons. It does help with a couple things, survivability and damage, but then it hurts this build as well, because while you're in Grisly Rage, you won't be able to use your Bulwark. Then on top of that, it's too much of an investment aspect-wise. And then finally, we aren't using Lacerate because it just doesn't seem to fit the build well. It's something I might look into more, but we're already investing into Storm passive, so Cataclysm just appears to be the best option. And then on top of that, Cataclysm has a 30% chance to proc Nature's Fury, which will proc Petrify Force as well. And in doing so, we will pull everything towards us and stun it and gain the additional crit damage. And for our basic ability, we are going to be using Claw. We will be maxing this out in the skill tree. And with the Great Staff of Crone, it will be proccing Storm Strike as well, so we'll max that out. It's our other main source of damage. And it will apply vulnerability for us as well. And for our last ability, I am using Cyclone Armor. I did test out Shred. Shred's a viable option. It does help your mobility quite a bit. But to make the transition to Shred, I think you would have to switch out an offensive glyph for a defensive glyph, or you would have to have more defense or damage reduction than I do. Once I get more upgrades, Shred might be the best option. And for our gear, I said earlier we are using the Great Staff of Crone. And then the gems we are using would be diamonds for barrier generation. The diamonds increase the damage of our Earthen Bulwark. It increases the barrier that you receive when you use it. And then in turn, they're better than just flat damage reduction, Sapphire Gems, because we're getting a shield that we're going to be just spamming nonstop. And then it's better than flat health as well for the same reason, because we're getting damage and survivability. For our two-hander, we're going to be using Topazes for 20% basic skill damage. This is one of the few ways that Druids could get basic skill damage. Then if you're going to focus on Earthen Bulwark damage or any other type of damage besides basic attacks, I would suggest using Emeralds, which give you crit chance to vulnerable enemies. For our helm, we are going to be using the Maya aspect. It gives you 20% damage reduction. For stat priority, we are looking for total armor, basic skill attack speed, barrier generation, and then cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is mainly there to help with our Cataclysm and Hurricane, but it helps with Earthen Bulwark as well. The aspect on our chest is going to be Mending Stone. It increases the duration of your Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds. And since I'm not using the symbiotic aspect on my amulet, this is more of a safety net, and I'll go over that in a second. For our armor, you're going to be looking for percent total armor, then ranks of Earthen Bulwark, and then any 2 forms of damage reduction. And on the chest, we could also take barrier generation, but in doing so, I feel like you'd have to supplement that damage reduction with a defensive glyph. And overall, I feel like you'd make more use out of damage reduction on this item. We are only really focusing 2 pieces of our gear on our defenses. For our gloves, the aspect's going to be symbiotic. I'm using these on my gloves instead of my amulet because my main goal at the moment is to hit 2 attacks per second. I want to see how the build performs with that much attack speed. But besides that, I would say symbiotic aspect is better on the amulet more often than not. And in PvP, it is as well. Because when you need unstoppable, better to have Earthen Bulwark waiting and then relying on procs. For the stats, we are going to prioritize attack speed, critical strike chance, storm skill, cooldown reduction, and then you could either get lucky hit chance for procs and for masochistic, or you could get critical strike chance with earth skills or lightning skills, depending on what you're focusing on more. For the pants, we are using Disobedience. I'm currently at 12k armor with this aspect at full stacks. I still have room for improvement. I'm thinking I could get anywhere from 13 to 15k armor. The stats we are looking for would be percent total armor, then 3 forms of damage reduction. For our boots, we are using the Ghostwalker aspect. While unstoppable, you gain up to 25% increased movement speed. and you're going to be unstoppable pretty much at all times. So it's a flat movement speed buff. I actually just found an upgrade. I don't know why it was so hard for me to find new boots, but I think the new boots that I got gave me a little bit less than 7% increase to total armor while in werewolf form, and that alone got me 1,000 armor. We're going to prioritize total armor while in werewolf form, movement speed, dodge chance, and then all stats to make our rare nodes easier to obtain in the Paragon board. Another good option would be willpower. And we already went over the great staff of Crone, but since we are focusing on the basic attacks, we are going to be looking for +9 ranks of claw. And then for our rings, we are using the natural balance aspect. This aspect gives you up to 45% critical strike damage with earth skills and up to 12% critical strike chance with storm skills. And your auto attacks get to apply this. This will be on at all times. And this alone took my earthen bulwark from averaging like 100 million damage to 150 million damage. For our next ring, we are going to be using the conceited aspect. This gives you up to 25% increased damage while you have a barrier active. And we're always going to have a barrier active. If you did want to use a different aspect, this is the spot that I suggest you switch out. I tested out the other aspects and I just prefer this one. I didn't see a positive change with others. Runeworker's Conduit, which is probably on par with this aspect. It just depends on your preference. You could use Edge Masters, which would be a 5% decrease to damage immediately. Then Overcharge aspect is another good option as well. In order of viability, I feel like the Runeworker's Conduit is the best option, and then the other two are kind of even. For the stats on our rings, we are going to be looking for vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, critical strike chance, and then barrier generation. Other good options would be maximum life or lucky hit chance. For the amulet, I'm using the rapid aspect. Like I said previously, I'm trying to hit 2 attacks per second, and I'm getting pretty close. I want to see how that performs. But for most cases, you can swap this with the symbiotic aspect. You will lose 15% attack speed, but you will gain an additional 3 seconds from the symbiotic aspect, increasing it to 8 seconds per proc. For the amulet, we are going to prioritize +3 ranks of Envenom passive. This gives you 30% more crit damage. It's multiplicative, then movement speed and total armor while in werewolf form. And then lastly, +3 ranks of all defensive skills. This will buff our earthen bulwark even more. Other good stats would be % total armor or any form of damage reduction. Preferably close damage reduction because everything should be close to you. You could dodge ranged attacks anyways. And then for our hearts, we are going to need 1 brutal socket and 1 devious socket. For a wrathful heart, we are going to be using the barber. And in my understanding, the duration on this shouldn't matter anymore. They should have fixed it. The only real difference you'll feel is on bosses when a longer duration will help you stack damage higher. And for our brutal heart, I'm going to be using the Caged Heart of Revenge. I know it says I'm using the lion heart, which gives you barrier generation and you heal for a certain amount per second while you have an active barrier. I was testing it out and I feel like I could be viable, but it all depends on your defenses. For me, it felt like a downgrade, but if I had optimum gear, it might work out. The Caged Heart of Revenge gives you up to 20% of incoming damage is instead suppressed. And when you use a defensive ability, such as Blood Howl or Earthen Bulwark, it will trigger explosion as well. And for our last heart, we are going to be using the Caged Heart of Inexorable Force. This allows your ultimates to pull up to 50 enemies towards you, and it helps a lot because our abilities are not ranged. This overall helps with clear speed and the damage you do. The more enemies you have on you, the bigger the damage is, the faster you kill things. For the Spirit Boons, we are going to be taking Wariness. That's 10% reduced damage from elites. Swooping attacks, which gives us 10% increased attack speed. Not focusing on attack speed. Either go for the critical strike damage or the critical strike chance. Bolster, since we still require this as a defensive. Another good option is Calamity. It extends the duration of your ultimate skills by 25%. And then we ended up dropping Overload for Calm Before the Storm. We're dropping our lightning damage to keep our lightning ultimate up pretty much all the time. And then Masochistic, extra chance to heal, survivability. For PvP, you would want to drop Wariness for Advantageous Beast. It reduces the crowd control duration by 15%. We are unstoppable most of the time, but this will help out. Then Iron Feather would be a really good choice for PvP. It's up to your build if you want to drop Swooping Attack, Masochistic, or Calm Before the Storm. And for the skill tree, we are going to be putting 5 points into Claw, 1 point in Enhanced Claw, and 1 point in Wild Claw. We are going to be maxing out Storm Strike as well because we are focusing on basic attacks. And the Great Staff of Crone triggers Storm Strike. And then we're going to be putting 1 point in Enhanced Storm Strike and 1 point into Fierce Storm Strike. For our core skills, we are going to be taking 3 points into Predatory Instinct and 3 points into Digitigrade Gate. For our defensive skills, we are going to be maxing out Earthen Bulwark. This increases the barrier that we receive and the damage that it does. And we're going to be putting 1 point in Enhanced and Innate Earthen Bulwark, 1 point into Cyclone Armor, 1 point in Enhanced Cyclone Armor, and 1 point into Preserving Cyclone Armor, 1 point into Blood Howl, Enhanced Blood Howl, and Preserving Blood Howl, then 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude, and 3 points into Vigilance. And then we are going to be skipping the companion skills altogether. And for our Wrath skills, we are going to be putting 1 point into Elemental Exposure, 3 points into Endless Tempest, 1 point into Hurricane, and then 1 point into Enhanced and Savage Hurricane, 1 point into Neurotoxin, 1 point into Toxic Claws, and 3 points into Envenom. For our ultimate skills, we are going to be putting 1 point into Defiance, 3 points into Natural Disaster, and 2 points into Resonance, 1 point into Cataclysm, and 1 point into Prime Cataclysm. And for our key passive, we are going to be taking Nature's Fury. We are effectively spamming both Earth and Storm skills, so this will be proccing a lot of additional damage. The only way that we would take another key passive is if we weren't using Earthen Bulwark in the build. In the skill tree, I feel like the points that are the most optional would be Digitigrade Gate. That's really up to your preference, and if you already have a lot of movement speed, you could move that into Storm skills for more damage. Bad Omen, Electric Shock, or Charged Atmosphere. You could even move it to Crushing Earth or Stone Guard if you want to enhance the damage of your bulwark. Other optional points would be Cyclone Armor. You could move that into Shred for more mobility, or into the Storm or Earth skills for more damage. I will link multiple build variations in the description below, including a Earthen Bulwark focus build, an injured Earthen Bulwark, and after I get as close as possible to the 2 attacks per second, I will be focusing on a pure Stormclaw build and other variations. Now I'm going to share some gameplay footage, and after that I'll briefly go over the Paragon and which nodes are optional as well. So in the Paragon, we first start out going to the left. We get the Tenacity node, which gives us maximum life and armor. Our first glyph's going to be Spirit, and then we're going to take the rare node Impel on the way out. Our second board's going to be Thunderstruck. We will be taking the legendary node here. I'll grab all the crit damage and vulnerable damage in this tree as well. Our second glyph is going to be Fang and Claw. It gives us 12% increased damage to close enemies. We will be grabbing all the rare nodes to buff those as well. The next board will be Inner Beast. In this board, we will be gathering a lot of armor and attack speed. If you chose to go a more defensive route with glyphs, you could drop some of this armor and take the crit in this tree instead. The glyph in this tree is going to be Outmatch. This gives you 16% increased physical damage. This buffs our two main sources of damage, our basic attacks and our Earthen Bulwark. The next board is going to be the Lust for Carnage board. If you are not prioritizing attack speed, you don't have to get this board. You'll save 15 points from not taking this board that you could place elsewhere. And after that, the next board will be the Constricting Tendrils board. The glyph I take here is Earth and Sky. Nature magic skills deal 10% more damage, and we also gain a lot of bonus life and nature magic skill from this glyph. We will be going north to the Ancestral Guidance board. We will not be taking the legendary node here. We are gathering all the basic attack skill nodes. If you are not focusing on basic attack, that's more points saved. And then the glyph we will be taking here is our one defensive glyph in the whole tree, which is Territorial. Gives us 10% damage reduction. The rest of our defenses come from the gear that we have. And the final board that you should have at all times, so you should always save 13 points for this board, is going to be Height and Malice. While there are 3 or more poison enemies nearby, you deal 45% increased damage. This will always be activated, so you'll always take advantage of this bonus. And here I'm just showing the natural balance aspect. Say I'm just using my basic attack and it procs my might aspect. My storm skills get increased critical strike chance and my earth skills get 45% increased critical strike damage. So this will be up at all times. Almost a guaranteed permanent buff. Again, I will be posting multiple builds down below. I will be doing a video explaining barrier generation and how it pertains to Earthen Bulwark. I'll link that down below too once I finish it. I hope this was a lot more in depth. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support. If you guys have any questions, comments, or feedback, I'm happy to answer. I will also be posting all further builds in my Discord. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a good day. I'll see you next time.